Hello, welcome to the second session of the Expressive Drawing course. In this session, I'm going to look at how tone can create moody atmospheric drawings, and I'm going to focus on buildings. Here's some inspiration from various artists that I've gotten off of the internet and collected from exhibitions. This really strong tonal contrast in these pictures, the excited scribbling marks here, the strength of the smudging in these pieces of work, which really help create an atmosphere. So here's one that I did earlier based on a cityscape, but you might feel, well, I don't really want to draw buildings. You can always choose a different subject. This I got from an exhibition, wonderful drawing of a tree trunk, really expressive, really dynamic use of marks. Here's a drawing from a mask, and again using the rubber to really create interesting smudges, contrast between smudged area and sharp lines. This drawing layering ink and pastels together to create this sort of moody face that looms out. And you might even prefer to go very abstract. These are all based on stormy scenes, mainly at sea, but you can look at skies, thunderstorms, etc. Now I'm going to be working with Indian ink, charcoal, chalk pastels, pencils, possibly Tipex. I've got a few little things, not quite sure if I'll use or not. We'll just have to see how the drawing progresses. But before I do, I'm going to do some warm-up exercises to help me, first of all, think about the types of marks I could make, but also to just practice and see what sort of marks materials like making. You may remember the sheet from the first session, and these are words describing different types of marks. I'm going to try out these and see which marks I think would be useful in this stormy picture. So definitely things which are scribbly, possibly angular and jagged, not so sure about spiraling or flowing or undulating, twisting, possibly wavy, not so much dancing. So trying to think of the types of marks which would be really useful for that sort of atmosphere I want to create. I'm going to start off with charcoal, black colour pencil, black pastel, and then move on to inks. And I've got the words above me to refer to. So just starting to think about the sort of marks I could make. So swirling, twisting marks, weaving marks, switch to squiggly, scribbly, definitely like scribbly, angular marks. Notice I'm sometimes using a pencil on its side. Jagged. Out the pastel. Right on its side too. Mixing them together. Much smudgier willow charcoal. That started to give me some ideas, and already you can sort of see the mood building. And now I'm going to have an experiment with the Indian ink, and I'm just going to be thinking about the different ways that it can be used. So first of all, with a brush, so I've got a flat brush here, just thinking about that sort of zigzaggy, and the bristles splitting slightly. It gets lighter, I can dab it and swirl it around. What about with a sharpened stick? Lovely scribbly marks that you get. Very nice. Again, I'm still thinking about those words. What happened if I sprayed that with a little bit of water? Oh, quite nice. That's a little bit of feathering going on there. What else? Dragging with card is always interesting. It's quite interesting what happens when it goes into the wet areas too. Using the edge. I'm going to try, I've got 2 pots of water, so I've got a clean one. I'm going to try wetting an area too, and then with my other brush, just dropping a little bit of ink in there, just sort of spreading its own sort of way, maybe a bit more. Yeah, ink spread and bleed. You can see that the ink has got quite a range of possibilities, but it also worth considering about what happens when you start to combine it with the other things. So bringing in that pencil, using it partly to drag the wet ink, but then to continue those marks. What about that? With a charcoal. And of course it's always white pastel too. So how does that go over the top? It goes over really quite well, covering this thing ink over. And a bit of Tipex, let's try that. Now I just happen to know this Tipex is quite interesting into wet ink, so I just thought I'd put a few drops in there and see what happens. It depends how wet it is. So playing around, trying different combinations. Now I've suggested a few things, but you could try other things. You might not have ink, but you might have paints, for example. You might try watercolour paints or pan set or anilinki if you got it, anything like that, or even a household paint if you preferred. But experimenting and seeing the sort of marks that you might be able to create and how they could begin to build atmosphere. Now, a practice with my materials, I built a vocabulary which hopefully I can use to create an atmospheric drawing. And I've also done some research to help me. So as I said, I'm going to focus on old industrial buildings. And I've got these two, which I think I'm going to combine. So I'm going to put some extra chimneys for height on these, and I've got these lovely pictures of sort of stormy skies. I want to try and get some of this sort of feel into the piece of work. Just a note about these is they both exhibit what's called 2-point perspective, which you can see it with these chimneys, how they get smaller and smaller and smaller into the distance. And if you were to take all these lines and follow them up, they would end up at what's called a vanishing point, where effectively they get so small that they become invisible. If you want to know a little bit more about perspective, you can always check out the outdoor sketching course, which is on our website, where there's a session involving perspective. But this is the basics. You can see this idea that things, as they get further away, appear small and small and small until they disappear. Now I'm going to sketch out my basic composition. I'm using the thickest paper I've got because I'm going to be using a fair amount of water, I think. But even so, I've taped it on all four sides onto a drawing board. And you want to be soft underneath because you're scribbling away quite a lot. And I've got my pictures just here. And the first thing I will do, looking at this one, is just establish some sort of idea of that sort of perspective. So draw some perspective lines on. That's the sort of side of the building, chimney going up there. And that's my basic blocking in, but now I want to create a real sort of atmosphere in that sky. So I think I'm going to start with the Indian ink. I'm going to start by putting quite a bit of water on. And right up to those sort of edges. So I made a start on that sky and dried it off a little bit. It needs more work, but I want to work a bit more on this first. And now I'm going to just start off, and start with this willow charcoal, I think. I want to just really lock in this building. Now that I've got it sort of blocked in, I want to look for lighter lines which run down it. So here, pulling these out with a rubber. Start drawing back in with that ink. The atmosphere is starting to build here, but I think I need to build in more contrast. You'll notice that it's not, 100% accurate. It's very kind of impressionistic. But the danger is to stop at this stage instead of pushing it further. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue pushing by working more into it. There's my final drawing. It ended up looking like a row of tenements with chimneys rather than a factory, but I'm quite happy with it. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed myself. I'm now going to show you some examples from past students.